Hey, this is Mohal Joshi from Los Angeles, California. I follow Indian foreign policy and defense with a special focus on Asia. You can follow me on Twitter at Mohal Joshi.
Hey, this is Kishor from Bengaluru in India. I am an international relations expert specializing in global security, conflict resolution, and international negotiation. My focus areas include peace building and digital diplomacy. You can find me on Twitter at Veggie Diplomat. Hello and welcome to episode 42 of India Rising Strategic Affairs Conversations with Mohal and Kishor. In this episode, we will look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first state visit to the United States in the 9th year of his Prime Ministership. But before we delve into it, we urge you, the listeners, to subscribe to our channel India Rising wherever you are listening to us. Also, if you are listening to us on YouTube, do not forget to press the bell icon to be notified about our new episodes. And lastly, if you have not left us a review, we urge you to do so as it helps other listeners like you in finding us. And now, let's get started. As we all know, Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited the United States, has visited the United States on multiple occasions in the 9 years of his Prime Ministership. But it was never a state visit, and this was the first time that we had a state visit, which in itself is a little surprising given the warm growth that we have seen in the Indo-US relationships. Be that as it may, this state visit was very significant in and of itself. And that is what we will talk about today. So let's talk about the primary takeaways of the state visit. And I'll start with something that caught my attention real big. And that is something called ICET, Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies. So what is ICET really? ICET was some kind of an initiative between the United States and India, where both of them had decided that they will bond closer in terms of the emerging technologies. So this was in the making for a long time. It was formally launched on Jan 31, 2023 by the two national security advisors, Jake Sullivan and Ajit Doval in Washington, D.C. It was based on the direction of President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who after their Tokyo meeting in May 2022 on the sidelines of Quad Summit, had announced to elevate and expand the strategic technology partnership and defense industrial cooperation between the governments, businesses, and academic institutions of the two countries. So in a way, this was two technical communities coming together and evolving and learning from each other to ensure that they try to stay at the forefront of emerging technologies. So the essential focus was on strengthening the partnership on the technologies that will drive global growth, bolster both countries' economic competitiveness, and protect shared national security interests. So this was not a coincidence, for instance, that Modi's ongoing visit was preceded by a meeting of the first US-India strategic trade dialogue in June, so that all hurdles under whatever regimes they had called ITAR and EAR are smoothened for the US companies to engage in joint production of high-tech systems such as aircraft engines, munition technologies, and armed drones in India. This was, I directly quoted Srimay Tolakdar from an article that he had written in First Post. But essentially, this was the kind of the culmination of year and a half long initiative that they had taken. So on the defense side, ICET announced a new bilateral defense industrial cooperation roadmap that will be intended to accelerate defense technology cooperation for joint development and production. Now, again, focused on exploration related to jet engines and other technologies. And under the IHET, both countries will now sign a new implementation arrangement for a research agency partnership between the National Security Foundation and the Indian Science Agency to expand international collaboration in a range of areas, including AI, quantum technology, and advanced wireless, to build a robust, innovative ecosystem between the two countries. Again, I quoted here from Jome Jospulakaran's article. So essentially, the underlining thing is that this this bonding that you see, or this initiative between the two countries that you see, is definitely for the long term, and the impact that you see will be felt much later in the future rather than any short term benefit. Mohal, so this is about the ISET.
Yeah, and then one thing I wanted to add is like also the National Security Advisor, the US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. So he was in New Delhi on June 13th, which was just like probably like less than 2 weeks before Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington, D.C. And
Right.
I think they had a comprehensive meeting with the Indian counterparts, including the I think he met like Prime Minister Modi, External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar, and also obviously his counterpart, India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, and they had a broad range of discussion on various strategic, regional and bilateral issues. And obviously they unveiled a roadmap for cooperation on this ISET initiative on critical and emerging technologies. But I think one thing I wanted to point out is like some people have pointed out that not only was it like Ajit Doval and Jake Sullivan in the meeting, also importantly, all the three deputy national security advisors of India, the Chief of Defense Staff, Chief of Air Staff, Chief of Naval Staff, the military advisor, the chairman of NTRO, the defense secretary, the raw chief, and IB chief. Basically, that's like the entire brass, intelligence and security brass of the India was present at the meeting. So this is like a very high level. I mean, usually we don't see like all these people present in one location, especially in a public location at the same time. So the June 13 meeting in New Delhi that preceded Prime Minister's Modi visit also was a very high profile meeting.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you want to take it forward, Mohan?
Yeah, so as part of the agreements or negotiations between the United States and India, like and also a lot of them is mentioned in the joint statement that was released afterwards. So a lot of the fields were covered. I mean, especially in terms of emerging and critical technology. So one of the most biggest one was semiconductors. Now, Micron, basically, they have promised to invest like 800 million towards an assembly and test facility in India. Another semiconductor company, Applied Materials, said it will build a semiconductor center for commercialization and innovation in India to strengthen the semiconductor supply chain diversification. And lastly, Lam Research has said that they will train around 60,000 Indian engineers to accelerate India's semiconductor education and workforce development goals. Now, as we know, like India is not like a major producer of semiconductors. So this is like a good opportunity for India to become more self-reliant. Obviously, like it's a very capital intensive and a technologically highly technical expertise is required. So it will take time for India to become completely self-sufficient. But this would help us move in that right direction with the help of not only like the public, but also the private enterprises, which be like the Micron Technology, Applied Materials, and Lam Research. So moving on to like the critical minerals partnership. So the US welcomed India into the minerals security partnership, which was basically established to accelerate the development of diverse and sustainable critical minerals, supply chain across the world. So India gets to join an exclusive club of 12 other countries plus the European Union in this the mineral security partnership. Also, interestingly, like India's Epsilon Carbon Limited has promised to invest 650 million in a greenfield electrical vehicle battery component factory, which will generate like employment of 500 employees over the course of 5 years. So, and then also it's reported that when approved, this synthetic graphite anode processing facility will be the largest Indian investment in US electrical vehicle battery industry in American history. So as you know, like electrical vehicle adoption is quite picking up in the US. So this will be interestingly an Indian investment into US versus the other way around.
Any idea which state in the US this will be in?
I'm not sure. I mean, I have to look it up at this moment, so
Okay.
I'm not aware. I think you can maybe Google it like while I cover the other point. So, advanced telecommunications field. So, India and US launched a public-private partners joint task force on the development of open RAN systems and on advanced telecom research and development. And India's Bharat 6G and the US Next G Alliance will co-lead this public-private research. Now, another exciting frontier was the space. Now, India had signed the Artemis Accords, which is a common vision of space exploration. India joins a small set of 26 other countries which have committed to the peaceful, sustainable, and transparent cooperation that will enable exploration of Moon, Mars, and beyond. So NASA will now provide advanced training to ISRO astronauts with the goal of launching a joint effort to the International Space Station in 2024. So this is kind of interesting. I mean, as we had heard before, that the Soviets, actually the Russians, I would say, have been helping our Gaganyaan astronauts, the Indian astronauts who are planning a manned mission in space. I believe it was the last I checked was like 2024 or maybe like plus or minus 1 year. I don't remember the exact year. So now it's kind of interesting. And I mean, even India's first manned, or actually India's only person to send in space, like Rakesh Sharma, was sent aboard a Soyuz aircraft in the, I think the early 1980s. So we have always relied on like more on the Soviet cooperation for manned space flight. So now, interestingly, NASA is also going to help us reach the International Space Station. So it'll be interesting to see how we blend the training from the Russian and the American side. Kishor?
Yeah, so again, not many people knew what the Artemis Accords were. So this is again a group of countries established by the US State Department and NASA with 7 other founding members: Australia, Canada, Italy, Japan, Luxembourg, United Arab Emirates, and the United Kingdom in 2020, essentially for setting common principles to govern civil exploration and use of outer space, Moon, Mars, comets, asteroids, all of these for peaceful purposes. And of course, as you said, the number of countries now have skyrocketed. It's now around 26, right? That's what you mentioned. So yeah, so again, this is a US initiative. Not surprising at all that it does not contain China or Russia, but India is now a part of it. Mohal?
Yeah, and also like couple of things on the space frontier. So scientific payloads for a synthetic aperture radar satellite, I think, which was already agreed even before this visit. They'll be delivered to India and they'll be used to measure the Earth's changing ecosystems and sea level rise and other stuff, So now moving on to the quantum and advanced computing and artificial intelligence. India and United States have established a joint Indo-US quantum coordination mechanism to facilitate joint research between the public and private sectors across the both countries. Uh, I mean, through its AI research center in Bangalore, Google is building models to support over like 100 Indian languages and working with Indian Institute of Science to support the open sourcing of speech data for AI models. So, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, as you know, like artificial intelligence is like the buzzword nowadays
Indeed.
across the world. So this is also furthering the partnership for doing joint development and research in artificial intelligence and quantum technologies.
Mhm.
And last but not least, also there is some investments in fiber optics. So India Sterlite Technologies has invested like 100 million in the construction of an optical fiber cable manufacturing near Columbia, South Carolina, which will facilitate around like 150 million in annual exports of optical fiber from India. So it's kind of interesting that some of these investments, it's like from the US to India, but also importantly, some of these investments are also going in the opposite direction from India to the US. You sure?
Yeah. Okay. So this is about the core semiconductor slash critical minerals space. Mohal, you also want to talk about the other thing that caught everybody's attention, the General Electric F414 engine.
Yeah, so this was like a pretty big deal in the eyes of many. I mean, what has been promised as per the reports is like co-manufacturing of the General Electric F414 engine. So now the F404, which is the predecessor of the 414, is already being used in Indian Air Force. So the Tejas Mark 1 is powered by the GE F404 engines. Now in India, while has achieved like self-reliance or Atmanirbharta, as the Prime Minister likes to say, in a lot of this aerospace field, one thing that we've been lacking is like a world-class engine that can power your fighter aircraft, and this has been quite a challenge. As part of the Rafale deal, I think that we mentioned earlier podcast, as part of the offsets from Safran, like the manufacturer uh, in France, and SMECMA, we were supposed to get the transfer of technology which would help us with our indigenous Kaveri engine. But those transfer of technology or offsets, whatever you call it, haven't brought like the end result in our. So unfortunately, we would have to rely at least on the next set of airplanes made indigenously in India to have a foreign engine. So if this co-manufacturing deal works through, it will help alleviate the issue of us not being having a homegrown engine. So, anyways, coming back to the present day, so around like as per reports, like 75 F404 engines have been delivered, and I think around 100 more odd are on order for the Tejas Mark 1 and Mark 1A, if I remember correctly. Now, the Tejas Mark 2, which is still under development, it requires a more powerful jet engine and it requires a bigger engine. So, I believe the F404, if I read correctly, I think it has like a max 80, maybe a little bit less than 80 kilonewton worth of thrust, while the F414 is a more advanced and has around 100, and it, as per some reports, it can even be engineered to go to like 110 plus kilonewton of thrust, which would be like more appropriate for the Tejas Mark 2, which will be uh, which is under development, and hopefully we can get it by the end of the decade if all things work out. And also our fifth generation future fighter aircraft, the MCA, or the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft. So if this GHAL deal to co-produce the engines in India comes to fruition, then it will be like a game-changing moment in terms of not having to import all these engines. Now, as per some reports, uh, in India, I wouldn't say in the US, they have been mentioned about 70 or even 80% transfer of technology. But only if time will tell if this comes to fruition to that extent. I mean, we have seen with the original Rafale deal or the MMRCA deal that there was a agreement to manufacture. I mean, the first one squadron of the Rafale was to be manufactured in France, and then the rest to be manufactured under HAL in India. But as I say, the devil lies in the details, and the deal fell through, and then the NDA government had to renegotiate the deal. So, lot to be seen on this front. I mean, but it's a definitely an exciting development where uh, if HAL can produce these engines, it will help one of the critical shortfalls in the aircraft development program in India. Kishor?
Yeah, definitely interesting times ahead. Transfer of technology, complete transfer of technology is something that we need to watch out for. Okay, so we'll quickly move on to the other aspects, geopolitical aspects. And one other thing that, again, I noticed was the joint statement. And in the joint statement, the strong statement on Pakistan was something that caught my attention. Now, we all know that post the withdrawal from Afghanistan, Pakistan is not front and center for the US anymore. Of course, a lot of bad blood also surfaced when the Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan lost the vote of no confidence in their parliament and had to step down, and there was a change of guard. So effectively, the US-Pakistan relationship is going through some turbulent times, and the joint statement now, wherein Pakistan was singled out for all the terrorist organizations that are still working based out of the Pakistani soil. I think that underscored how much US sees eye to eye with India in terms of establishing the modus operandi of these terror groups, and also referred to the 26/11 Mumbai attacks and the Pathankot attacks. So essentially, point is that the US is firmly behind India on this one, and any amount of sugarcoating that these are non-state actors by the Pakistani power, definitely not being bought by the US influencers. So I think that was again a bit significant. Now, the other thing, moving on, the other thing that again caught my attention was the statement of Ukraine. I mean, definitely, while Pakistan is something that would be added, maybe on maybe on the insistence of India, a statement on Ukraine again would be added definitely on the insistence of the United States. Now, the statement seemed to be pretty mild, to be honest. It called for respecting territorial sovereignty, which is okay. Now, again, this was the max that Modi government and India would go in terms of calling out Russia for its war in Ukraine. Now, in all respects, this could be considered as a mild rebuke to Russia, nothing more than that. But then again, a small deviation from what India again had been talking about in the past year or so, wherein it kept telling that stop all your hostilities and then get back to the discussion table. But now an additional dimension has been added now, wherein they're telling respect the territorial sovereignty. So I think that is interesting. Now, another thing that Modi had said long ago has had caught a lot of attention in the US. Modi had said that this is not an era for war. This is not the time for war. So that had generated a lot of interest in in the US, simply because the US diplomatic circles, the US foreign policy circles looked at India as as a country that was taking an ambivalent stand while purchasing oil, Russian oil, and still trying to have defense deals with the US. So I think this statement caught the attention in Washington, D.C. long time ago. And even in the speech to the Congress this time around, Modi re-emphasized that this was not definitely not the time for a war. So I think all that cumulatively signified a slight shift in Delhi's position, emphasis on territorial integrity and sovereignty. Uh, again, people think now that this subtle change is significantly good buy for people from Washington, D.C. That there is a marked difference in the way India looks at the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Mohal, anything you want to add there, or we can move on?
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I think Prime Minister Modi also received quite a bit of applause when he mentioned this. This is not an era of war. And even I think when he made the statement initially, when I think he met President Putin, I mean, even the US State Department, and they welcomed the statement. I mean,
Correct.
also the statement to territorial sovereignty is also related to the Chinese incursion into across the LAC in Ladakh. So that would have like more relevance in just more than just one theater.
Right, right. That gives me the perfect segue to talk about the next thing that I have in mind, which is about the Chinese reaction. Now, of course, China watches everything closely, and especially when you have a state visit to the US by the Indian Prime Minister, China would obviously be watching even more closer. Chinese media termed the United States enthusiasm for India to be wishful thinking. After all, who can forget how Global Times keeps mentioning that whenever the US tries to talk about the border incursion, China, Global Times is quick to point it as saying that the US is the real troublemaker, and it wants to encourage India to get to wage a war against China. So that is the kind of rhetoric that they always had, and even this time around, they said that the enthusiasm for India was nothing more than mere wishful thinking. Now, of course, Beijing is backing the Russian President Vladimir Putin on the coup that the attempted coup that we saw, and the U.S.-China truce, wherein just about a week before Modi was supposed to go to the U.S., Jake Sullivan, no, it was Antony Blinken who visited Beijing, and there, while all that was happening, suddenly we had the American President Joe Biden calling Chinese President Xi Jinping as a dictator in a private setting with Democratic Party fundraisers. So all these add up, all these add up to definitely paint a full picture. And Chinese definitely want nothing of this, wherein they don't want the US and India coming together ever closer. So this was again something that caught my eye, and no surprises there, but their knack of pulling in colorful words is always good to watch. Mohal?
Yeah, I mean, they can't be happy. I mean, they always think that India is kind of doing the bidding of the United States
Proxy
in
for the US. Yeah.
yeah, and it's trying to like not as very a lapdog of the US, but I mean close to that language that they are always doing the bidding of the Americans, and the trouble is being stirred up by the Americans. Otherwise, like India and China should be best of friends, which I don't know in their mind, given all their incursions across the LSE, why would India be friend with them? But that's for another
Absolutely.
podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. So while all this was happening, there was something else that also happened, which kind of stirred the hornet's nest, so to speak. There was a interview of President Barack Obama by CNN host Christian Amanpour, and she was talking about the minority rights in countries which are perceived to be friends of the United States. And that is when she tried drawing a parallel between the human rights record of China and human rights record of India. And she kind of really kept harping on the same topic and essentially wanted Obama's take on it. And Obama never lost that opportunity. He managed to have a jibe at India. And let me read out what he said. And I quote: "If the president meets with Prime Minister Modi, then the protection of the Muslim majority in a Hindu majority India is worth mentioning. If I had a conversation with Prime Minister Modi, who I know well, part of my argument would be that if you don't protect the rights of ethnic minorities in India, there is a strong possibility that India would at some point start pulling apart." He continued, "We have seen what happens when you start getting those kind of large internal conflicts. So that would be contrary to the interests of not only the Muslim India, but also the Hindu India. I think it is important to be able to talk about these things honestly," unquote. Uh, I mean, this kind of jibe had a lot of loopholes, and I'll quickly mention a few. First of all, these are not ethnic minorities; they are religious minorities. Ethnically, we all are one. One, two. There's nothing called Muslim India, Hindu India, at least in terms of the constitution that we have. So again, Obama was
I
wrong
think that
there.
one that separated Muslim Indians at Hindu India like in 1947. So I'm not sure like which decade is referring to here.
Exactly. And then he also kept mentioning that what was that? Large internal conflicts. And I don't think there are large internal conflicts. There are minor issues here and there in a few states once in a while, but definitely not large internal conflicts the way he mentioned. So I think he kind of went bombastic with his words, and that's a mild way of putting it. So again. I think he based everything on the partition riot that we had in 1947, and maybe if he had told it in the best intention, then fine. But I don't think it was as simple as that. It was much more than that. And again, the backdrop of Modi's visit, Modi's first state visit, and Obama mentioning this can definitely not be brushed under the carpet. Mohal?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people were alleging it's kind of a good cop, bad cop routing being played. I mean, since Biden can't say in public like anything about like human rights that many in the Democratic Party or in his administration would be wanting to pull up Modi on because of the ever deepening relationship. Like they used probably like the former president Barack Obama to attack him. I mean, the timing was curious. Like it was right in the middle of the visit. Like why would he be choosing such a moment? So the other interesting part is like I think this is lot of. I mean, even it this provoked a sharp response from the Indian side. I believe two ministers also returned the favor to Obama with remarks on his term. I mean, it just became a political minefield. Also, I think some of these remarks were for the internal Democratic far left. I mean, I think around 6 members of the so-called squad in the U.S. Congress were going to boycott the Prime Minister Modi's address to Congress. And I think to satisfy that lobby, I think they have put up Obama to do this kind of mischief. I mean, I don't know what else to characterize it, because if you remember, like, I mean, like talking about like pulling itself apart is almost like calling for the balkanization of India, which I think most people would not take it kindly to any such remarks as to like breaking India apart. And I think like he might not have a lot of friends left in India post this remark. Obviously, minus the some of the activist crowd. So this was, but I think I think it's more to be looked past this, but I think the relationship is in a much more strong. I mean, even like the national secretary, there was a Jake Sullivan said that, and I quote him: ultimately, the question of where politics and the question of democratic institutions go in India is going to be determined within India by Indians. It's not going to be determined by the United States, end quote. So this means, like, I mean, a lot of people who want like US intervention into India's domestic politics will be disappointed. I think the US do realize that there are divergences and convergences. I think they would have to work internally on the divergences, but I think the convergences, especially on China, are much greater, where they need to like focus on.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll quickly wrap it up now. Anything that you want to mention right now, Mohal?
Yeah, so I think see, like India and US, I mean, are becoming closer. I mean, they are not like formal allies, obviously. We are never going to sign a formal treaty. I mean, we are going to have a formal treaty between India and US.
Yeah,
I
that's not
mean,
going to happen.
there is be a lot of economic, financial, and technological linkages and cooperation. On the, I mean, US also understands that like their biggest challenge today. I mean, obviously there's Russia, but also it's like China, to say the least. I mean, they already have not good relations. I mean, for lack of better term, with Russia and now China. Now, if they start have deteriorating relationship with India, I mean, you cannot have like deteriorating relationship with like the second and the third largest power, and maybe, I mean, I wouldn't say like India is the fourth largest power, but like with three big countries, you don't want to end up having like bad relations. So I think they need India. It does need India in its corner, and it will look past some of these, as I said, like divergences. I mean, the goal is how to, I mean, just like, let's say if you are with a friend, like, I mean, you might not agree with everything he does, but you look past those differences with your friends, and you try to work on the commonality and how you can further your relationship or friendship with your friend, you know. So it's like similar stuff. I mean, this noise about human rights and democracy and illiberalism and stuff will keep coming up from time to time, but I mean, it's just more of noise at this point. As long as the China threat is in the background, I don't see this would become like a breaking point. Obviously, as we said, I mean, I might sound like a broken record on our previous podcast that this is all I mean, to satisfy the domestic constituents, some of these issues will have to be raised from time to time, and it will generate a lot of TRP and clickbait and media headlines. And some in India who don't like Prime Minister Modi will be happy to see these comments being made by the US side, but they have like very little bearing on the overall I mean, trajectory of the relationship, which is just upward. I mean, you can see like how important the relationship. I mean, even on the at the state dinner for Biden by Prime Minister Modi, the US Marine Band played like the iconic Lata Mangeshkar's song "Ae Mere Watan Ke Logo." I mean, this it is something that wasn't lost on all the guests. I mean, now in India, we all know the significance of the song, which was written in the aftermath of the humiliating defeat in the 1962 war with China. So, I mean, it's even like some small um, stuff like this, like playing an iconic song which is related to the China war, playing at the state dinner, has like a significant, I would say like it has significant consequences, but it's of what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Sorry, I'm at a loss for words. I
No,
mean, it has
but
like
yeah, definitely the
quite a
opportunity was not
significance.
lost.
Yeah,
Opportunity
it
was
has.
not
Yeah,
lost.
it has quite significant I mean, it might be a token representation of the relationship, but it's still like it means something to Indians, us Indians, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, of course. I mean, you'll always keep hearing the the two ends of the spectrum, even in the US. I mean, Geeta Mohan, Indian journalist who was in the US at that time, managed to catch hold of Elon Musk while he was exiting after meeting Prime Minister Modi. And when she asked about the Twitter uh, uh, tiff that they have had with the Indian enforcement authorities, um, Elon Musk clearly said that the US version of democracy cannot be superimposed on any other country. I mean, that's what he meant. I'm obviously paraphrasing. So that's the one end of the spectrum. And the other end of the spectrum is where they want India to absolutely go by the rule book of the American value based democracy. So you will always get to hear these two differing takes, and that is something that the Indian side also fully understands and appreciates. So I think this will continue, but the friendship or the relationship as such is growing from strength to strength. So I think the minor things can be left as it is.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the broader picture, defense cooperation has grown exponentially. I think, as per reports, I think we ordered almost like 20 billion of defense equipment in the last, I would say, a decade plus. I mean, also we get on a designation as a major defense partner in 2016, strategic trade authorization in 2018. Obviously, there'll be like, oh yeah, and also remember, like we had the three foundational agreements signed, right? I mean, I think we covered some of these in our podcast, like Lamoa, Comcasa, and Becca. Also, during the standoff with China, like I think US was providing real time information to the Indians. So
Yeah.
I mean, short of like, see, like if the balloon goes up in the South China Sea, India's not going to send warships to fight along with the US. And conversely, if Chinese look for a military skirmish across the LAC, India has to fight on its own. I mean, as I was like jokingly telling somebody that, I mean, you have to fight your own battles. Yeah, somebody can come and prepare you. I mean, let's say if there was some gali ka gunda in your colony. I mean, the other guy, your friend, is not going to come fight for you. Yeah, he might train you. He might tell you the latest kung fu or jujitsu, or I mean, he might give you protein shakes to build up your muscles, or he might even give you real time intelligence of hey, where that enemy is coming from. Like but in the end, when it comes to the blows, you have to do your fighting, and I think that's what I mean. We are not a treaty ally, and India is like confident of like defending herself. So there will be like certain restrictions. I mean, I know like people like Ashley Tallis said like India, they have made a bad bet on India, but I mean, in the Foreign Office article. But if you think of it, like honestly, it's like too negative of a view, because I mean, there will India won't do all the bidding of the I mean, the Ukraine war has perfectly seen, and I think the United States does understand the Indian viewpoint, has come around to the viewpoint, but I mean, it's taken quite a bit of diplomatic effort on India to make them see the point. So obviously there'll be differences from time to time, but I think they have to work on the strategic convergences. And I think one reason why people are called this visit as an inflection point in the relationship is like the ISET, like and all the technological stuff that has been promised to India. I mean, now whether that happens is an open question, but in semiconductors, in defense technology, sharing of the GEF 414 engine. So what's different is like earlier, like there were like statements, or maybe there was this defenses, but this time there's a clear I would say like enthusiasm on the US side to transfer a lot of the critical technologies to India, because they do see India as a valued partner in especially their larger struggle against Chinese hegemony in like Asia and around the world. So I mean, many people are calling it like maybe an inflection point in the relationship. Maybe that's true. I mean, hopefully all this technology that has been promised does come over and does uh, strengthen Indian what do you call not only the resolve on the border, but also Indian capabilities to further check Chinese advances in the neighborhood and across Asia. Kishore?
Okay. Yeah. So that's about the defense cooperation and also the ally discussion that keeps coming up. But then I think to sum it all up, what I found interesting was the remark that came from Indian ex-ambassador to China, Mr. Gautam Bambawale, and he said, and I quote him, "Today, India, China, US are the three largest economies in the world in terms of PPP, purchasing power parity. If any two of them come closer to each other, it will be alarming or discomforting to the third." So that was his actual words. Of course, if India China cannot see eye to eye, although China wants India to do that, India China growing stronger and stronger in terms of their bilateral relationship will obviously lead to a lot of irritation for China, and that is what we keep seeing in their media outlets. So I think that sums it all up. While there is a lot of bilateral relationship growth that we see, one eye is definitely on what the Chinese reaction will be. So that is something that will keep coming up for discussion time and time again. Mohal, anything else that you want to add before we wind up?
No, I think you summed it up well in the end.
Okay. Okay. So, people, this is what we intended to cover as part of the state visit of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the United States. Now, to continue hearing about more such interesting topics, do subscribe to our channel, India Rising, wherever you are listening to us. If you are listening to us on YouTube, please press the bell icon to get notifications about new episodes. And if you have not left us a review, we again urge you to do so as it helps other listeners like you in finding us. We would also like to hear from you if you have any suggestions on any topics that you would like us to cover. Do remember that these topics should be directly related to Indian foreign policy. And as we conclude, this is a time to remember that the visit itself was unprecedented and it got a lot of media attention. Now, until the next time, this is Mohal and Kishor signing off.